The Muppet movies are full of crazy special effects, wildly imaginative illusions such as rats making pancakes, a shrinking giant, and even a young Michael Caine. But the illusions that have baffled me for years is when Muppets go outside, when they seem to break free from their puppeteers and become little sentient creatures. Take this shot. If this is how Jim Henson operates Kermit, where is he in this shot? Or this one? Or that one? How come this bike isn't falling over? Keep in mind, these movies were released before CGI was ubiquitous. These are in-camera effects. What you see is what they shot. So how did they do it? How does a Muppet sit on a bench, drive, bike, walk, or cross the street? Oh no. Kermit, look out! For thousands of years, puppets have been performed inside a box. Jim Henson's innovation was popularizing puppets in a different box. The television allowed a much bigger audience to get much closer to the puppets.
He used a tight shot, the television tight shot, to create his particular style of performing, which means that if you have a tight shot, what you're doing has to be subtle. And these type of characters were never seen before either.
For the Muppet movie, Henson wanted to take the puppets out of the box and into the real world. To find out if this would work, director James Frawley brought Jim Henson and Frank Oz to the British countryside for an improvised test.
Look at this tree.
Yep.
Isn't that terrific? Look at all those twigs and branches up there. Look at those leaves.
That's a great looking tree.
Yeah, look at that bark. Feel that. That's real bark. That's real tree. Great to be out here, huh?
Yep.
A bear in his natural habitat.
As you can see, the characters look phenomenal outside, and it's a funny image, the wacky design and attitudes of the Muppets in the mundanity of the real world.
Do you know anything about the way to Hollywood? Hollywood, California? No, it's over near Los Angeles. Have you ever been to Los Angeles?
You take these characters, which are basically rather cartoon-like, and you put them in the very realistic world of outside that you can tell is outdoors. And to me, then they have an additional reality.
When they're lit by sunlight and next to a field, it's remarkable how alive they seem. There was only one problem: arms, hair, and the rest of the body of the Muppeteers. The challenge of shooting outdoors is hiding the Muppet performer. So how did they hide the body? Back on the Muppet Show, they used platformed up sets, built high enough to hide the entire performer's body.
The necessity of doing a shot like this, in order to make it look good up there, has to be uncomfortable down here.
But if Frank Oz is down here and Miss Piggy is up there, how does Frank Oz perform? How does he act out the attitude of a conceited pig with a couch between them? Even from down here, he can see Miss Piggy. Check out what he's looking at. A monitor that shows a live feed from the camera. This is the most important technology in a Muppet production, because without it, the performers are blind. The monitor's live playback allows the puppeteers to give the Muppets their nuanced behavior. But how do they hide the puppeteers and their monitors if they were outside?
It's harder because there are not the platforms, there's not the whole television system around us that we work with in a studio. On the other hand, it's fun. It's a challenge to try to create a reality there.
They figured it out while making a Christmas special.
Jim came to me and he said, we're planning to do a Muppet movie. But before we do that, we're going to try out a few things, and we're going to do that with this thing for HBO called Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas.
Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas features the most elaborate set any Muppet production had up to that point. An entire Depression-era town surrounded by a giant landscape, meticulously detailed with shrubbery, fences, and houses. The highway of this community is a 55-foot long and 10-foot wide river. Floating in this giant tank of water are ducks that are marionetted from above. But more remarkably, Emmett Otter and his mother rowing a boat. Which begs the question, where are the puppeteers? Were they drowning underwater with an arm reaching through the boat? Nope. They didn't even get wet. For the medium shots, they built a dolly for Jerry Nelson and Frank Oz to sit on in front of the river set. By framing the shot carefully, the illusion was maintained. But what about the wide shots? Scuba gear, a tank underneath the boat, extra long arm extensions. In this case, Nelson and Oz are nowhere near the boat, which is radio controlled. Each oar has a little electric motor that rows Emmett's arms. As the oars go forward, his interconnected body leans back, and that is the man who invented it. Faz Vazakis is the man behind many of the Muppets' mechanical inventions.
What I do is help them all as much as I can by making it possible for them to do things which without these devices they otherwise might not be able to achieve.
The boat isn't the only thing that's remote controlled. For the first time, the Muppets are. Nelson and Oz are operating the puppets several feet away from the boat with a mitten-like device made of servos and actuators called a Waldo. That is how Kermit can sit on a park bench. Remote puppeteering. The disadvantage with the Waldo is that the Muppets movement is quite rigid. Muppet behavior has much more nuance when operated by a human hand, which is important for a character like Kermit, whose squishy face is an essential part of his expressions. So what about this shot? Kermit's body is malleable, his felt skin folds freely. This is clearly not a Waldo, but a hand puppet. Where is Jim Henson hiding? You might be able to figure it out if you look behind the bench. Notice how the spotlight doesn't line up perfectly, but mostly look at the back legs of the stool. They don't exist, and Jim Henson is hiding right there. It's a mirror. The stool's legs are cut in half, then a mirror was placed in the middle facing the camera. The mirror reflected the back of the front legs, which created the illusion of a complete stool. Jim was able to crouch behind the mirror and operate Kermit completely hidden. So what about when Kermit sings Rainbow Connection in a swamp? Is this frog in a log radio controlled just like the boat? Partly. His hands playing the banjo are, but the rest of him is much too expressive, so must be a hand puppet. But how? Much like the mirror illusion, Jim Henson is underneath Kermit. He crouched down in an aluminum canister which was then sunk into the water. 3 lines came out of the tank, one for his video monitor, one for his audio, and one for air.
And then we broke for lunch and they let him out and he couldn't get unfolded for 15 or 20 minutes to get himself straightened out.
You can imagine the safety complications of folding Jim Henson in a barrel in a swamp. The incredible part of this isn't a real swamp. Just like Emmett Otter, it's a set, a giant tank of water on the backlot of MGM. Production designer Joel Schiller's bog recreation was so authentic that he even added dragonflies. It took 5 days of filming, and one instance where he spent more than 3 hours underwater, but the discomfort couldn't have been more worth it. With his arm sticking out of a hole in a log, Jim Henson made a frog sing. That's not to say every shot is a set. They did shoot outside. To make the Muppets walk, the Puppeteers would lie down on dollies and roll, or stand in a hole in the ground, or be hidden behind objects, being careful to retake the shot anytime an arm or head came into frame.
Fozzie, where did you learn to drive?
I took a correspondence course.
Fozzie driving a Studebaker was done outdoors with a real car really being driven. Frank Oz and Jim Henson are underneath their characters curled up on the floor. But wait, who is driving the car? Not Oz driving blind, but someone in the trunk. Don't tell Fozzie, but this steering wheel doesn't do anything. A stunt driver in the trunk is using a rewired steering wheel and is able to see where he's going by looking through a monitor which was connected to a camera in the front. Kermit had ridden a bike before in Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, but he wasn't very good at it.
Hi all, this is Kermit the Frog, and I'm here to tell you the story about Emmett Otter's...
So for the Muppet movie, an ingenious but fragile machine was built, a radio-controlled bike that rode itself, which then broke on location. So, special effects supervisor Robbie Knott decided on a much simpler solution. If you look closely at the shot, you can see how it's done. Remember the ducks? You'll notice there's 2 monofilament strings holding the bike up. A full-bodied Kermit puppet was fit onto a scaled-down bicycle. Kermit's hands and feet were attached to the handlebars and pedals, and then marionetted from a crane above by Knott, while Henson did the close-ups.
Now we would constantly intercut this shot with a shot of a hand puppet version of Kermit. And for the hand puppet version, I would actually operate Kermit on a little low-rolling dolly.
In The Great Muppet Caper, many more Muppets became cyclists. A much more ambitious scene that ended up being easier.
And we found as soon as we did 2 bicycles, it was really easy, because then we didn't have to worry about holding the bicycle up, because we could tie the 2 bicycles together across the axle. And once they were attached together with a stiff rod, then we could just pull both bicycles with a single string.
You'll notice that each bike is paired up with another and attached with rods. For this wide shot, you can see that the bicycles are attached together in 2 separate groups, each being pulled along by a tricycle. A fun side note, that guy on the tricycle is Brian Henson, who would go on to direct the Muppet Christmas Carol. All of these illusions are different forms of puppetry, whether it's radio-controlled, a marionette, or a hand puppet.
Puppetry is a very wide field. It encompasses a lot of different ways of operating. There are many, many different techniques, and I think right now it's very exciting because I have the feeling you can do almost anything with these guys.
We've only taken a look at a handful of the illusions that Henson's team has cooked up over the course of several shows and movies. But in any Muppet movie, I believe the most incredible illusion is the most basic one. The Muppets. It's remarkable how they are complete, charismatic, living personalities.
I always feel the magic of the puppets is really the way they come to life, and the way you can look at this piece of cloth or foam rubber and you make it a real character and you believe it and you like it and you laugh at it. To me, that's real magic.
Especially given how limited they are with their frozen facial expressions. But rather than detract from the performances, these limitations are a huge part of their charm.
See, puppetry is a very limited form. Puppets can only do just a few things. They can't begin to do 2% of what a person can do with his face and his body. And so it becomes this big game where we're trying to fool the audience into thinking they're seeing the characters do everything they want to do, when actually we can do only a little tiny bit.
We are constantly exposed to computer-generated effects with flawless realism, but I think there's also value in illusions that aren't trying to be realistic. When you put a puppet in the real world, you can't help but notice the artifice. These are playful illusions. They acknowledge and celebrate that filmmaking is a magic trick. The beauty of these illusions is they don't take away from the simplicity and vitality of the Muppets. They exist only to add them to the real world.
What'd he say? Basically, he said that our reality is just an illusion created by special effects. No wonder I'm broke. I can't afford myself.